up.
You're listening to Prosper in the Kingdom, the podcast where faith meets practical strategies to help you become healthy, wealthy, and wise. Join hosts John Cleaver and Wendy Lee as they share insights to equip you in your journey toward abundance, spiritually, financially, and beyond. Just a reminder, every situation is unique. The content of this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as specific financial or medical advice.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I was frozen there for a second. I'm like, oh, just in my own little world. This is John C. with the ever amazing Wendy Lee. Hi, Wendy.
Hey. What's happening?
All right. Okay, there we go. Let's bring a little, not compassion. What's the word I'm looking for? Man, energy, maybe? I don't know. So it's a day late, but we're not a dollar short. We're here to show you some money moves that you can make. Here at Prosper in the Kingdom, we're all about teaching the 3M framework, which is about making more and managing it better, being a good steward from a biblical perspective, and then multiplying it. Go back to the parable of the talents, right? So not just to build wealth for you, but to empower you for freedom and obviously being generous in the kingdom to your family and friends and others. So that's really what we're all about. But today we're going to be talking about one of the big lies. And I'm just going to straight out call it a lie. I could call it what is that?
Misconception.
Yeah, maybe, or something like that. But it's whatever, man. I'm going to keep it real. It's a lie. And it's about time with wealth building. And everybody always thinks, especially when you're younger, I was the same way, right? I've got all the time in the world. I don't need to worry about that. And then my grandmother, I remember, and I've shared this before, when I was a little kid, she said, no, don't wish your time away, because I was turning 10. And I said, I wish I was turning 13 to be a teenager. And she's like, it's going to go fast enough. And I just kind of looked at her because, back in the day, it seemed like it took forever to hit 3 o'clock, the school bell rang or whatever, and forever to get to the weekend and stuff like that. But as you get older, time flies by. So it is definitely, it can be your friend if you get your hands around it early. But let's kind of dive in on what I'm talking about. So you look at, most people have been told, we all get this when it comes to wealth building. And I don't like talking just about retirement, because it's about wealth, right? Being able to keep that money liquid, keep it protected, and access it not just in your 70s and 80s, but your 40s, 50s, and 60s, so you can make other money moves and things like that. But the whole concept of, stay early or start early, stay consistent, and let time do the work sounds responsible, and it sounds disciplined, which there's that component, and it even sounds wise, from a wisdom perspective, right? The problem, though, and I want everybody to hear me on this. The problem, though, it assumes your money compounds consistently over your entire life. That's when you start looking at average rate of return and things like, oh, that's average rate of return is 7%. So we look at these numbers and it's like, oh yeah, 7% every single. That's not how real life is, right? Mm-hmm. And because that assumption is flawed, it really starts costing people not months, but literally years of growth period, right? And if you've ever felt like you're doing the right things and you're not getting ahead on your wealth strategy, your 401k, whatever, right? This is probably why. And this is something that I figured out early on in my own personal financial journey, late 30s. I'm like, what the heck, man? Why aren't I crushing it? And this was a big component. I'm not the only component, but a major one. So that's really what we're doing today, right? We're going to break down what's really happening and how to fix it using that 3M framework that we talked about, make, manage, and multiply, right? I don't know. Is this something that you've felt as well, Wendy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're told, we're told just put your money put your money here in XYZ place, and average rate of return is this is how much you'll have at the end. And it never works out.
Right. Well, and that's the problem, right? Most people look at it as that straight upward line, right? And the reality, it's a cycle. You get growth, drop, recovery, repeat. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. And what most people don't realize when they lose money in the market, and that's Warren Buffett, right? The Oracle of Omaha, his number one rule is don't lose money. Rule number 2 is see rule number 1. because when you lose money, let's say the market corrects 25%, right? I need more than 25% to get my money back to be made whole again, right? And those major market corrections, like 2008, 2001, 2000, there have been a couple since then as well. They happen about every, 6 to 8 years on the outset, right? So you look at that and it's like, well, what do you mean by major correction? Well, when the market corrects, and drops by 25% or more. You look at the S&P back in 2008, it dropped, I believe, 39.5%. Don't quote me on that. It was 39.5, 39.7. It was high. Okay, let's put it that way. But and it devastated a lot of retirement plans, especially if you're, about to retire. But that doesn't even include, that 6 to 8 year cycle. That doesn't include what I call the mini corrections along the way, where you have a drop of, 8, 9, 10% for a year. Okay. And the real issue, it's not the drop, it's that recovery time we were talking about. And I had an advisor at the time in '08, and I was like, man, I'm kind of freaking out like everybody else was, this, that, and the other. And he told me something. He's like, don't worry about it, John. You'll get your money back. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, I guess he's right. But at the time, before I really started diving into this, what did I didn't think about, I got my money back, right, in 2012, 2013. But what I didn't really consider was the 4 or 5 years that I lost of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's typical. That's about typical, 2, 3, 5 years before you get your money back. And, you figure, okay, well, I'm going to work for a certain period of time. That's going to be a major impact over my working career, because you're not working forever. You're building wealth. You're maybe working for 35 years. You're getting serious about wealth, 25, 30 of those. And you think, okay, I've got 25 years to do it. I got all the time in the world, so I don't need to rush and do it now. Well, when you really look at it, it's your money's not compounding during that lost period of time, right? It's just rebuilding money. It's like going to the craps table, or the blackjack table, laying $100 bill down, and you lose it. You're like, whoa, man, it's gonna be a quick night. I better slow down. So you start $20 and you win, $20 and you win. Hey, I've only lost once and won twice. Well, yeah, but you're still down. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's a good analogy for a biblically based channel, which is why I don't gamble, folks. But it's again, it's about losing that time, not just the money.
Yeah. I never, again, was always, we're just taught the basics, right? Where we hear the basics repeated over and over again. And so I always, my parents, that's all they had really was the 401k. And I would hear my dad talk about it going down, and gotta wait, it'll come back up. And one thing I never heard, and I didn't understand at first when you started teaching this, was the ups and downs, and like timing the up with retirement. Like, what if you want to retire and you're in market correction year? And anyway, so it opens your mind and you start thinking about all that. And like you said, over 35 years, if you have 4 to 6 major cycles of dropping and then getting your money back, then that's 10 to 20 years in your career that you're not actually compounding wealth, that you're just getting back to even. And that's something, again, looking at, I teach people this all the time, and I've said it here about the $100 up 50, down 50, right? Like when you gain and then you lose the same amount, you're actually losing more, right? If you've gained money and then 50%, and then you lose 50%, big number, and your rate of return is the average 0, you actually have less money than when you started. And that's something that most people don't wrap their heads around or think about. So that average rate of return that you see that you're getting isn't reality when 10 to 20 years of it are getting back to 0, So you think you have 35 years of compounding, but the reality is it's closer to 15 to 25 years of that actual forward progress. So,
and that's the challenge too, is a lot of people, going back to your statement about trying to retire, right?
Mhm.
People try to time the market, and let's be honest, most advisors can't even time the market out there, which is why I like protected asset classes. But you look at trying to time that market, even if you are able to sell at the peak of the market, all of those correction periods in your past have cost you significant amount of money because of the compounding time that you've lost. Over that 20 years, 30 years, you're actually growing maybe half of that. And so I had a friend of mine, and I wanted to touch on this. He had planned on retiring. I kid you not, 2001 was his target year. And I met the guy in 97. He was one of my mentors, and early in my career. And a really, really awesome guy, Dennis. He was one of the muckety mucks in our sales area, and just a genuine great guy. And he had planned on retiring. We're talking about it. He had a place up in Michigan on the lake, and yada yada. And the correction hit in 2000, and he could not retire. He had to work an additional, I think it was almost 7 years past what he planned. And it still wasn't quite what he wanted it to be, because then you consider inflation and everything else happens. And that's 7 years delayed retirement, 7 years of getting unhealthier as you get older, right? And so, it was sad to see. And he's not the only one. I mean, it happens all the time. So
Yeah.
it's important.
Yeah. A market correction of 30% when you're, we got a million to retire. That's a big chunk of change.
Yeah. Considering a lot of people put their stuff in pre-tax, and we talk about that too, right? So,
Yeah.
and and I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Keep going.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
So, you look at that, and it's that 50 to 25 years of actual forward movement progress. And I think that's being generous, right? You lose that opportunity, right? It's opportunity slippage. And this stuff, you look at what happened to Gen X. I mean, I'm going to kind of pound on that, because Gen X, I'm just going to be straight up, we got screwed, right? Not by anybody intentionally, but by the market and our opportunity. So there is something out there, and I'm familiar with it. Most people in Gen X, I don't think are, but it was called the lost decade for Gen X on wealth building, right? And basically what happened, because of, we had Y2K, and the market was kind of like, whoa, what's up? The dot-com bubble, 9/11, all happening between that, 99 to 2001 period. The market took a big hit, right? And then about the time we started getting our money back, which was about, the lost money back, the recovery was about 2007-ish. And then we had 2008 the market. And so it went down again. And so literally, I mean, from about 2000 to 2012, they call it the lost decade, I think, because that sounds better. It was just devastating to the growth period. I mean, so basically what I'm saying here, folks, if you had 100 grand and you put it in the market in 2000, right? It didn't add to it, but just put it in the market. You still had about $100,000 in 2011, 2012. Okay. And I'm not making this up. I'm going to put this out there. Check me. Go out to Google, right? That's our oracle of information, and Google the lost decade of Gen X growth. Okay. And see what comes back. And it'll tell you the whole story of what happened. And that's devastating for us. And that was about the time, we were just getting our careers going, talking about, okay, well, most people don't get serious right out of college about building wealth. That was about the time I started stacking cash and things like that, in my mid-20s. And it was going nowhere. And that impacts, because that's early in my career, right? So all of that time afterwards, money that I should have had compounding over the last 20 years isn't, because of that lost decade. So it's not a bad year. It's a bad decade for Gen X. And again, they just didn't lose their money. They lost all of that time, 10 years of prime wealth building, gone forever. You can never get that back. You can't work longer on the end, even though you're probably going to end up doing that, to make up for that, because of that time that it should have been compounding over your entire career that it didn't. Yeah. And it's just,
yeah,
that's got screwed. So yeah.
Well, and then there's issues at every, all the different generations. You're talking about Gen X, Gen Z, which is, you and I both have Gen Z kids. What they have right now is time, right? They've got the time. But they are a lot of them putting their money in super high risk, right? They're not like, oh, most of them don't have a job where 401k is an option right now.
Yeah.
And they're, some of them are smart and opening some Roths and things like that, but a lot of them are putting their money into high volatility strategies. So like crypto, right? We were just talking to someone last night that's like, I want to put everything in
Yeah.
crypto.
Yeah.
Right. So
It's like the lottery, man. It's like, going out and buying lottery tickets. 190 million as of today, right? I think for Powerball. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go put that 190. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a crypto fan, right? I'm a convert. But again, all the eggs in one basket is insane,
right.
And it's highly volatile. So.
And that's what, a lot of them, we saw. This might be a little bit more the millennials, but I mean, I just saw recently, we saw the spike in silver, and all these people who never invested in precious metals all of a sudden running out and going, I want to put all my money in silver. And it's like, you kind of missed the big jump, but like, let's not put all your money in there. So it's a lot of the chasing the hype out there with the younger generation instead of really like looking at structure and like you said, diversifying and going, okay, we need to put in different baskets to make sure that we have things covered. Yes, you want to take advantage of crypto if you're able to, but that's not where all your money needs to go.
No,
because we have literally no idea what's going to happen with the future of that.
Yeah. I think, the Clarity Act's going to do some things and stabilize it. But I tell people, 5%, maybe 10%, treat it like Vegas. If you lose the money, you're not going to be, crushed. But it's funny going back to that silver conversation. And I've always been a fan of precious metals too, no more than 10% in precious metals, because it's, more of a store of wealth as opposed to building wealth, depending on what the dollar does and things like that. But yeah, it's crazy. And that's, I think a lot of that is due, especially for the Gen Z group, is due to, TikTok. You see all these people on there flashing, hey, look at me, I did this and I blah, blah, blah. And most of that crap is fake. And most of the people on there with AI aren't even real anymore.
It's insane. I know.
Yeah, it is. But you get hooked in. It's like, oh, and that's the problem, right? There's a lot of noise out there, but I'm like, steady Eddie wins the race, right? It's
that's
like
true.
have a little bit here, have a little bit there. Let's talk about real estate and let's do, the precious metals. Yeah. I mean, are they going to continue to go up? More than likely, but that big jump that we had a few months ago, it's like, I want to go on a cruise as the cruise boat's pulling away.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you've got the millennials. So they're in that high pressure zone right now. They're getting in, right before their red zone, right? And they're trying to build wealth. They're raising families. Kids are staying home a little longer for the millennials, right? They got kids that aren't leaving the house, costing more money. They're dealing with the volatility and then that constant feeling of having to play catch up, because a lot of millennials did not start investing, did not start putting away for the future. And so, I mean, I'd say a majority of the millennials we talk to really don't have anything saved for the future. So they're in that, I gotta do something. I gotta make a move. I gotta start doing, and they've lost all this time. And then, you throw everything into the market and you have that volatility, what they think is maybe 20 years left, right? Shrinks down to, 2/3 of that or whatever. So, and then of course your Gen X, like you've talked about, but, bottom line is time is not being used efficiently, right? Regardless of what generation you're in currently.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's, even the boomers, we're subject to that, but the boomers had something none of the rest of us have: pensions, right?
Yeah.
So if they screwed up, it didn't matter. They were still going to get a paycheck for the rest of their lives. Gen X, they took those away. Millennials and Gen Zs, unless you're going into the government, as an employer or the military, you're not looking at a pension. I think that the military even starting to fade out pensions with the TSP and things like that. So don't quote me on that, but it's very, very critical that you pay attention to what's going on and start, and it's, again, you don't have to start large. The more time you have, the less money you need to, to actually build something significant, because you have the time, but it's making sure you're managing, the time, make sure you're, putting it in the right strategies, looking at the taxes and things like that. But, again, that's what the 3M concept is all about, right? It's not about building wealth just with time, but you've got to be efficient, right? We talk about make, okay, and we show you how to increase your income and increase your margin, not just increase your income and then add additional expenses, because the end of the day, you want to have a larger margin, not just a larger income. And what do I mean by that? Well, less bills, things like that. And you can do that honestly without even increasing your income. What do I mean? Paying off your debt, right? I just went through a whole thing on my home and auto insurance, right? And I preached this, and I started making some changes, and I actually shifted my home and auto strategy, and it saved me $5,000 a year, $5,000 a year, and that's insane to me. But it'd been a few years since I shifted. I kind of fell asleep behind the wheel on that because we got a lot of things going on. You know what? I need to practice what I preach, right? So we're all victims of this, but that's how you increase that margin. Okay, so it's not just about making more income; it's about making more margin. All right. And then the manage piece, right? That cash flow, we just kind of talked about that. But you've got to make sure you're protecting the empire you built, right? Something could happen. You got to look at, okay, the situation I'm in right now, maybe I've got a spouse or a partner, and we're splitting the bills or whatever the case may be. What would happen if all of a sudden they weren't in the picture anymore? They get a divorce, you guys separate, or God forbid, they pass away. What's going to happen? It's going to be a financial, explosion in your world. And that's what you want to make sure you protect against, and make sure you're, not getting knocked backwards repeatedly. Market loss, same deal, right? Where are you at that's creating stability? Okay. And then the multiply piece, not just chasing returns like you were talking about earlier. That was such a good, hit. People, high return, high return, high return. So there's something out there, everybody looks at volatility. Okay. And high risk. Everybody thinks they're going to be the one that cracks the code, right? And reality is, and Tony Robbins wrote a great book on this. It was Money Master the Game. He wrote a second one. I keep wanting to say Unforgiven, but that's the Clint Eastwood movie that I love.
Yeah. His second one is basically the first one edited.
Condensed, yeah. So look at Money Master the Game, but there's another one. It starts with a U, but it's not.
Unshakable?
I don't know. But anyway, look it up. It's a good book, but it talks about, how many people are actually out there beating the market. And less than 1% of the advisors out there are actually beating the market consistently. And that's really where it's like, it's a reality check, right? And it's just a reinforcement on the strategy I love, which is indexing, protected asset strategies and stuff like that. But, don't just chase the returns. Okay. You got to focus on efficiency, growth efficiency, liquidity, and also tax efficiency. Okay. Those are the big ones, because it's not about how much money you grow. It's about how much money you keep. So, again, that's kind of the 3M framework, but reality is it's all about reducing major losses, right? Which you protect that time. Okay. Because that's key, right? You're protecting the time that you invested in building wealth for your family, creating that balance, smoother growth. Again, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't be super aggressive, and hope. And that's kind of where I was going with that. But looking at, young people, I got all the time in the world, get aggressive, get aggressive. And then you get your 40-year-olds like, oh crap, I'm behind, get aggressive, get aggressive. And then you got your, later in life, oh man, we're not going to have enough for retirement, get aggressive, get aggressive. And that really puts you open to a lot of pain down the road. And there's something called the rule of 100 out there. Basically, you take 100, subtract out whatever age you are. That's the percentage you should be a little more aggressive with, but the rest of the stuff needs to be in that steady eddy. So, for example, if you're 50, 100 minus 50 is 50. So half your stuff can be a little more aggressive. The other stuff needs to definitely be protected. Okay. And if you combine the best, where you're getting good returns and protection, that's the trifecta, right? But, again, it's all about keeping your capital moving, avoid dead money. Maybe you have a second home or a lake home that's just sitting there. You're not using it. Why are you doing that? Why aren't you Airbnb that out, generating revenue? Because that's what it's about. It's not about acquiring assets. It's about acquiring assets that generate income for you. It's all about the income streams. That's what you're going to live on. Keeping that capital moving, right? And making sure you're checking it every year, not just did it grow or not, but is it being efficient? Am I in the right place tax-wise? And that's really where you need to get with a planner and really kind of sit back and have a real strategy, not just a planner. I'm talking like What about an estate planning attorney, and making sure you're able to pass on the generation and things like that. But the core idea is really avoid setbacks, right? Because every setback that you avoid, right, are years that you gain back. I wish I could go back and had heard about protected asset classes in 2006, right? Because that would have saved me literally 5 years of my growing period. And I didn't know about it. And that's why I ended up, when I found about it, I'm like, everybody's got to hear about this. So, again, just to kind of wrap this up, Proverbs 21:5, the plans of the diligent leads surely to abundance, right? Again, it's all about planning, putting a plan in place, setting your goals. What's my plan to get there? And then executing the plan consistently, right? Mm-hmm. Diligence equals not just effort, it's strategic planning, right? You've got to be doing the effort, you got to be doing the action, but you got to be in the right places. And again, most people don't fall behind because they started too late, even though that does happen. They fall behind because they misunderstand how time works. They think I got all the time in the world, or, oh yeah, I'm going to get average rate of return of 8% or whatever, or 10%, whatever the case may be. And they think it's just going to be a straight line growth. And that is not it. It's not built, wealth is not built by the clock. It's built by how well you use the clock. Okay.
And they're like, I'm going to build for 20 years and then retire for 35 and somehow it's going to work.
No, it's called math, folks. We talk to people all the time. And I was like that too, right? It's like, oh yeah, I just need to put, a few $100 away or whatever. And I'm going to work till I'm 55 and then retire. And it's all going to work out, right? First of all, you'll never find the word retirement in the Bible. Okay. And pick up that challenge. If you can show it to me, fine, I'll buy you lunch or whatever, but it's not in there. Now you may choose to be free, which is what we're trying to do, right? Join the financial revolution and fight for freedom, fight for your family's financial freedom, where you work when you want to work, for who you want to work for, and for what you want. If you want to do it for free, whatever, but you've got that financial independence to be able to do that. That's what it's really all about, right? But if you need help in these areas, we'd love to help you. Grab your free Safe Money Roadmap. We'll put the link in the show notes. SafeMoneyRoadmap.com. We got real technical with that. So if you need help, let us know and get clarity on where you're at and where you're trying to go and how to make your time work efficiently, right? On all fronts, not just put it in one thing and go, but really, start to take ownership of your financial journey, and don't just throw money at the wall, hope it sticks and it all works out. Because 9 times out of 10, if that's your approach, it ain't going to work, right? And you don't want to be 60, 65 going, well, what do I do now? So anyway, anything else to add, Wendy?
No, you covered it. It's good. People need to, have a plan.
There you go.
So get that Safe Money Roadmap.
Hey, do us a favor. If this helped you out, show a little love. Give us a thumbs up. And if you're listening to our podcast, give us that 5-star review. That really helps our algorithms. It's so quick for you to be able to do, but it really helps us get the word out on what we're trying to do. And it's all about education and really showing people how they can take ownership of their financial journey. If you do need help, let us know on that. Go to that Safe Money Roadmap link and just mention the show. It's a free plan. Do something with it or not, but at least now you know what the heck's going on in your world. Right. And share this video, share this podcast with others, and help us grow the channel just to free God's people to start making some waves in the Christian kingdom. So bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Prosper in the Kingdom. If this episode added value to your day, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with someone who could use the encouragement. For more resources, head to prosperinthekingdom.com. Let's continue building lives of purpose and abundance, one step at a time.